Welcome everyone to our special panel presentation, Island Songs, Making Music in the Middle of Somewhere. I'm Mandy Rousel and I work at the Memorial University's Harris Center. Today's panel is part of the 17th International Small Island Studies Association, or ISISA, conference, sharing lessons, sharing stories. This 5-day event is being hosted by the Harris Center and we're so happy to be welcoming attendees from around the world. While the majority of the conference is for those who registered, today's panel is open to the public and it's currently streaming live on the Harris Center's YouTube channel. The Harris Center was joined by Memorial's Office of Public Engagement, who helped fund the ISISA conference, to put together this special event. Before we begin, I want to acknowledge that the lands on which Memorial University's campuses are situated are in the traditional territories of diverse Indigenous groups, and we acknowledge with respect the histories and cultures of the Beothuk, the Mi'kmaq, the Innu, and the Inuit of this province. We encourage everyone to reflect on these lands from where they are located this afternoon and to consider the Indigenous peoples for whom these lands are traditional territory. With us today are 4 fantastic musicians from Sweden, Newfoundland and Labrador, and Prince Edward Island. 5, if you include our great host, Ivan Emke. Ivan has spent a quarter century living in Western Newfoundland, teaching, researching, administrating, and generally hanging around with a wide variety of people, including many musicians and artists. He spends his time these days working on several radio and podcast shows, including Roots and Branches and Beyond, a show that starts with Celtic and roots music and invariably ends up somewhere else, serving on boards, thinking aloud about food and agricultural issues, worrying about rural communities, and playing obscure, to some, music in various sessions and bands. So with no further ado, I'll pass it over to Ivan. Thanks, Ivan.
Thanks so much, Mandy. And it's great to be here, albeit virtually. It's something that we've become quite used to, unfortunately. I really miss having a live audience and hearing people kind of fold their programs and adjust their suit jackets and open their cough candies, before a concert's ready to begin. So we have to just assume that you're doing that virtually wherever you are, or if you're on YouTube or whatever. A special welcome to everybody from an island. I mean, people from the mainland, you're welcome to be here too. But also people who are members of the public who don't have to go here to this session, who aren't academics and by virtue of having to get tenure have to attend sessions at a conference. So I hope that you enjoy this and you find just how much fun an academic event can actually be. But this is a slightly different kind of an academic event because we have 3 sets of artists here today with us who are going to be able to share some of their music and talk a little bit about being an artist, being a musical artist, and others, because there are writers here as well, composers and so on islands, and so we have a particular interest in that. So there are 3 folks who will be doing songs. They'll each do 2 songs. We'll kind of stagger it and we'll have some questions in between there. And it's basically a chat among all of us, and hopefully everybody will be able to join all of the artists as we go. You've maybe read some of the bios, but let me give you a quick summary of the 3 groups, and they're sort of in the order that they'll come. So Kate Lahey is not just a musician and a writer, but she's also a PhD candidate as well at the University of Toronto, which is a little school over Upper Canada way. But she writes arts criticism as well, and she's done a series of audio essays in 2020, including some conversations with Newfoundland Labrador artists about visual culture and memory in Newfoundland Labrador. She plays in a band called Weary, and I was reading up about them. They're referred to as gentle slacker rock. I love how, the creativity of music journalists when they're trying to categorize the uncategorizable. I mean, I do as well, unfortunately, but it's a 5-piece band out of St. John's, and Exclaim magazine said, exclaimed that they did comforting atmospheric pop. They've toured Eastern Canada, played festivals, showcases, pubs, the whole gamut, and won a number of awards as well based on her music projects. The important thing is that she does a variety of other things. She's on a number of boards, which is always very important, groups like Girls Rock NL, and she does arts programming at the Clarenville Women's Correctional Institute and other things. So she's going to be doing some songs for us as well. We have with us Catherine MacLellan, and the opening page of her website, if you look at it, lists 5 subject positions. Sorry, that's an academic term. 5 subject positions: singer, songwriter, advocate, mother, daughter. I could end there for the introduction, but I won't. But she's recently released in 2019 her 7th album, Coyote, and it's 14 songs. It's recorded and was produced at her home studio in PEI, and you can purchase it wherever you buy good music. They're songs of joy and heartbreak, of course, loss and promise, everyday daily life. And now some Canadians who've been kind of alert over the last several decades might know her late father, Gene MacLellan, likely sang some of his songs at campfires over the years, like Put Your Hand in the Hand or Snowbird, or sang the first verse of the song, because you know how campfires are and lyrics, they kind of go out of your head. She did take some time in 2017 and made an album of some of her father's songs, and worked on a show and wrote a show about based on her father's life and music as well. But Catherine has gone from strength to strength. She started in 2004 with her first solo album. She was raised in Summerside, PEI, which is that island province's second largest city. And before going solo, she played with a band called the New Drifts, and worked on a couple of collaborative, some of us also heard her on some Canadian songbook tours, folks like Mary McLaughlin and Barney Bentall, Stephen Fearing, and so on. She's won a Juno, she's won East Coast Music Awards, Canadian Folk Music Awards, so we're very glad to have her with us today. And earlier I admired her piano because it looked a lot like one that we couldn't move at one point. Also, we have from Sweden, we have Uwe Ronstrom, that's from Gotland, and Gotland is Sweden's largest island, which is about 90 kilometers from the mainland, I believe, in the Baltic Sea. He's a professor in the Department of Ethnology and Cultural Anthropology, although I think they put it the other way around, at Uppsala University's campus in Gotland. And he also teaches at musicology in Turku in Finland. So you can ask him anything about time signatures and he'll get it right away. He's written and researched in areas around dance and ritual and music and multiculturalism, the culture of aging, which is a particular interest to me these days, and of course, islands. He's also a musician, composer, arranger, and has been on several bands over the years, none of which I can pronounce. He's got 15 records, I think CDs out, and he's done a lot, probably a couple hundred radio broadcasts for the Swedish Broadcasting Corporation as well. For his fiddling, he's been awarded the title of Riksspelman or something like that, which also means a national fiddler, master of folk music, and other awards for his research and writing. Now, like any good island, Gotland has its own unique breed of pony and sheep. Just like Newfoundland Labrador has its own pony or sheep. And I don't know, PEI, do you have a unique breed of pony? Maybe a unique breed of lobster or potato or something like that. But I realized that just this morning when I was reading up about Gotland sheep, that I grew up in a farm close to a farm that had Gotland sheep in Bruce County in Ontario, oddly enough. They're very well known. They have to shear them twice a year because they're so prolific with their wool. He'll be accompanied today with Eric, by Eric, his son, who's also a musician, one of Sweden's leading folk guitarists. He's a member of a number of bands as well. And 5, I think, are listed on his bio. So we're so glad to have them with us today. So instead of talking too much more, let's start with some music. And as I said, we sort of go in order of the people that I've introduced here. So we're going to ask Kate Lahey if she'll favor us with a song to get us started here.
Yeah, absolutely. Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for having me. I'm really, I got to say, I'm a little bit nervous because unlike some, I've been really hermiting. I'm in a 200-year-old salt box house on the ocean in Holyrood here in Newfoundland. And I've been really leaning into, some of the gifts that I've been privileged to have through isolation this year. And this, and probably many other islands, but I can only speak for myself as a Newfoundlander. Isolation brings gifts, but it also brings horrors. And I've been really trying to lean into the gifts amongst the many horrors of this year. But I'm a little bit nervous because part of that has been not playing music and not writing music either. I've been teaching a lot this year and my energy has been going towards that, but I'll probably chat a little bit later about the role that teaching and mentorship has played in my journey of music as an islander and as a Newfoundlander, particularly, I would say. So yeah, bear with my nerves, but I'm going to start off with a song called Retreat. And it's a little bit of a play on the idea of retreating. A couple of years ago, I was talking to a bunch of different women in my life. And they were always going on these retreats. They were always going on retreats. And it's a term I hear all the time. I'm taking myself on a little retreat, or I'm going on this retreat with some other people. And the idea of retreating from something as the only place where you can rest. And I think I'd like to see a world where women don't have to retreat to feel nourished. Yeah, so this is a song about that, and you'll hear some of the lyrics, but it's situated in a very place specific context. Okay, here we go. Tired of hurting, tired of grief, I went looking for relief. I went looking for peace, something like love, something like truth. I went looking for you. I'll rent a saltbox on a beach, nothing but me and sea. I'll look for you in all the wrong places, like I always do. I'll get nowhere, get there fast. Looking back, I know it won't last. Looking for you, should have been looking for me. Take time for me, make routines and projects, but I'll realize the fears in here. Storm doors knocking on a windy night. I'll be scared of the mirror, scared of myself, scared of you. I'll make shadows of death for self-portraits. I'll be a party dress in seaweed. I'm a eulogy for you. Show my love through a camera, and this knot in my gut. Didn't know what was hiding here. Hiding here. Hiding this insidious shit. Thank you.
Thank you. You know, the usual thing is that you sort of wave your hands around on Zoom,
Yeah.
which is hard because I'm not from a charismatic religious tradition, so I really feel uncomfortable doing it.
Yeah.
That's wonderful. You mentioned just a minute here, question. You mentioned a bit about being on an island, and you mentioned a couple of words like gifts and horrors, and I don't know if that meant referred to the pandemic or living on an island, but in some ways the benefits of being on an island and making music there could fit into both of those characteristics. But how have you found, in your experience, being in Newfoundland Labrador, how has the island shaped the musician that you've become?
Well, it shaped the person that I am because, you know, without throwing shade, you know, I am a Newfoundlander and Labradorian, and not all musicians here are. So I haven't, you know, had the experience of coming from away and then having it sort of shape my musical life. I am a Newfoundlander, so my life is shaped intrinsically by this place. And my music is more so sort of like an extension of me. And I think that's the way that islandness sort of interacts with my music. And, you know, I remember like I only started playing music a couple of years ago in my early 20s. And I love folk music, and I grew up going to the folk festival, and you know, my grandparents are all from out around the Bay and stuff. And so I grew up around sort of folk music and with mummering and with traditional song. And, you know, like I was making kind of like poppy, rocky music, and I play with a band. And I'm not very always very comfortable sort of just playing acoustic guitar and singing. And I was talking to my dad about it, and I was like, like maybe I'm not Newfoundland enough, as an artist. And my dad said, well, you're a Newfoundlander, so then everything you do is Newfoundland music, like what would get classified as Newfoundland music? And is it, I don't know, is it only, people who come from away who pick up fiddle songs from here that they think are interesting, or is it also about representation and allowing us to tell our stories in various ways that are based off of our, really various diverse experiences as Newfoundlanders? So, that was really liberating for me to hear that, because I was sort of thinking a lot about my own identity and sort of what that meant in art and what my responsibilities were, around representation and all these kinds of things. And that was just really liberating for me. And it kind of gave me space to really explore my story more authentically too, like without worrying too much. Coming to music later in life has brought lots of anxieties with it of, you're being watched and listened to in this really vulnerable way for the first time. And it's easy to become kind of self-conscious, about what it is you're sharing when you're writing original music. And unlike lots of people too, who play folk music and island music, like I didn't play an instrument as a kid. I don't know the jigs and the reels. I don't know the traditional songs. I've never played a cover song in my life. I can only do what I can do. And coming to embrace that sort of story and figuring out, through my own poetry, how I want to tell my story has been like a really big journey. And I think, a couple of things that really inform that are just being in a really, I left Newfoundland when I was 17 and moved to Toronto, and returning here was really important to my creative life. It's when I started playing music, was my sort of homecoming, and getting to be on the island and on the land and hiking and swimming every day. I was swimming in a waterfall yesterday, and I was hiking by the ocean. And then of course I'm really interested that there's some folks here who are curious about sort of aging as well, because all of my research is about intergenerational trauma from a sort of autoethnographic lens with my grandmother's life, who was born in Outport, Newfoundland, in a small community called Taylor's Bay on the tip of the Burin Peninsula. And intergenerationality is a huge part of my life. And I'm going to play another song later called Body, and it's about my grandmother. But yeah, those are some of the things that sort of shape my experience, and just like some things that I think about. This is all in process. Like I don't have answers to this, but there's some of the things for right now as a young person and as a very young artist that are kind of like running through my mind that I think about.
Great, thanks so much. I noticed that one of your videos, which is in the internet, you're going for a walk in overlooking, is a very classic Newfoundland Newfoundland scene. So if anybody has never been to Newfoundland Labrador and would like to see that, just look up Weary, and I forget the name of the song, but it's a video available.
Yeah, it's called Bruise, and I actually directed that video as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes. And I appreciate your comment about what is Newfoundland music, because that's late at night in a donut shop. That's what folklorists talk about. And I think anybody going into Fred's Records down on Duckworth Street there, and you see the broad range of what's Newfoundland music. I think it'll open your eyes. Yeah.
Absolutely.
We'll go from one island and we get on a ferry, and then we could take another ferry or take the bridge across, and we get to another island, a part of the Atlantic bubble. Catherine, please, if you have a song for us, this would be wonderful. Thank you.
Yeah, sure. Kate, I really related to a lot of the things you were saying about not really feeling like living up to the local culture as a songwriter. I really struggled with that for a long time, and in a way, it kind of pushed me away from the traditional music of Prince Edward Island. And just over the last 10 years or so, I started falling deeply in love with the fiddle and with traditional music. And it's interesting because like it has turned some of my songs towards that direction. My last record was actually, I had a lot of traditional players on my record, and wrote a couple songs that fit more, loosely into that realm. And so I'm going to do one of those. This is a song called The Tempest. And I wrote it based off of an Irish traditional tune called The Tempest. And but the source of the story, it's about fishermen going off to sea and being caught up in a storm and just wondering if they'll make it home. Of course, all the fishermen I know, if they actually, made it back to shore, they wouldn't be like, sorry, fishing's no good for me, I can't do it. It's so, for me, I just don't even like boats. So this is my version of what a fisherman would think being caught in a storm. How far from shore, my love? How far from shore, my love, has the wind carried me? How far from shore, my love? How far from shore, my love, has the wind carried me? Oh, watch the wildest waves. Oh, watch the wildest wind carry me away from me. Oh, watch the wildest waves. Oh, watch the wildest waves carry me away from me. Oh, watch the wildest waves fall on us. Oh, watch the I haven't played in a long time. I'm going to try that again. Oh, watch the wildest waves. Oh, watch the wildest waves fall on us from light of day. Oh, watch the... If I ever make it back to shore, I know I will never... It's so crazy. It's because I played it too many times today. I'll get that chorus for you next time around. How shall I return? How shall I return to you, my dearest love? How shall I return? How shall I return to you, my dearest love? Oh, watch the wildest waves fall on us by light and moon. Oh, watch the sun come back soon. If I ever make it back to shore, you know just what I'll do. I will never let the wind or waves take me away from you. Oh, watch the wildest waves fall on us by light and moon. Oh, pray the sun to rise and winds to die down soon. If I ever make it back to shore, I know just what I'll do. I will never let the wind or waves take me away from you.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
For the guitar geeks, were you in a dadgad kind of a tuning?
Yeah, that is Dadgad, actually.
Okay,
It's,
excellent.
I don't play a lot in it except when I'm learning Irish tunes.
Yeah. It's kind of interesting. Both you and Kate have talked a bit about, tradition. It can be a resource. It can be a source of identity, but it can also be a bit of a constraint in a way. You sort of have to come to it on your own terms. I don't know if you want to talk a bit more about that you sort of introduced at the beginning. Yeah.
I definitely, I do think that I had to come to it on my own terms. I didn't grow up in a family that played traditional music, and I grew up in a family that was full of music, just not that kind of music. which is really interesting because I always felt like the odd person out growing up in PEI because everyone knew how to do the, Highland fling and play all the jigs and reels, and I didn't know what a strathspey was, and so I felt kind of excluded from that world. But then it's a really open world, and I've made a lot of friends, people who grew up in those big PEI families that, generation after generation, like the Chasen family and my friends in Vishtan, and just so many beautiful players and writers and performers. It's just been nice to kind of meld those worlds together.
Mm-hmm. I've struck me sometimes, and I was too old when I learned this, but that sometimes people who are traditional musicians or come from that and have a deep well of tradition are actually very open to a wide variety of kinds of music. They're not really particularly strict because traditions do change. Do you find that in PEI as well?
Yeah, I mean, the best example of people doing traditional music in a brand new way are the East Pointers with Tim Chasen and Cody and Jake. They've brought, I think it's really cool what they're doing is bringing traditional music through a pop lens to thousands and thousands and thousands of young people who are then like, oh, like traditional music is really cool. So yeah, I think it's important that we not stay stuck in these little boxes.
Yeah. So once you've bought Catherine's CD, you can probably just link up to the East Pointers and buy some of theirs as well, and just spend all of your money on PEI. Well, I'm just saying that now because you're on now. I would say Newfoundland or Gotland, later. But thanks, and we'll be back with you in a moment. But now we take an airplane or a ferry or whatever, and get to Gotland. And I was looking at the ferry from Sweden to Gotland. It's about a 3.5 hours or something like that, 90 kilometers, something like that. And it costs like less than $60 Canadian, because I was actually thinking about booking it. And in Newfoundland and Labrador, if we spend $60 and spend that length of time, all we do is we get from MacLellan's to Hermitage, stop in Galtus, and we have to take our own sandwiches. There's nothing to buy. So you're really in the middle of civilization there. So Ovi and Eric, over to you. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you. We will start with playing some, of course, traditional tunes, then also from the island. They're traditional in the sense that they are old style maybe, but the first and the last song are really new. They're made by friends of ours. And but the middle one, it's a set of 3 songs, and the middle one is really old, but the other ones is new. But it doesn't matter too much, as Catherine and Kate also said. It's only the music that counts, actually. These are the tunes here. These are traditional Swedish dance tunes that we do here in the island here. Okay. Oh.
Wonderful. That was wonderful. Here in Atlantic Canada, sometimes, let me ask you a question here about the fiddle traditions there, or the traditions there. In Atlantic Canada, sometimes people say, well, it all sounds the same, people from outside, but indeed the different provinces, the tunes and the traditions are very different. And of course, when you get to different bays, they're very different as well. Here in North America, we talk about Nordic music as if all of these countries have music that's pretty much the same. How do you deal with that there? How do you just, and since you're so close together with so many centuries of contact, do the traditions kind of meld into each other sometimes, or do they remain distinct?
Yeah, it is true that it is that we do. It is true that we today have you could call it a Nordic sound, since there was a huge revival movement in the 70s, which sort of spread a new kind of Nordic, more homogeneous style, which became very popular all over the world, actually. But below that, or a little bit beside that, or behind that new wave, there was also all these very different styles and traditions. So here in Gotland, it's really different from what you can hear most of the Nordic bands play. It's more here. There was a huge influence of musicians from Poland and Austria and Germany and things. So it's a little bit Baroque style, if you look at it from the musical point of view, and so on. So it has other tendencies here, but today. It's true that today all the Nordic countries come together, at least from the outside. It sounds the same, people say, but that's true also for blues and rock.
And don't forget country music, yes.
Yeah. Or Mozart or whatever. It's, we talk about styles here. And the interesting thing here in this island, at least, is that when it comes to music, and when it comes to being an islander, as Kate spoke about, and Catherine also here, it's sort of double-sided. On the one hand, maybe 1 or 2 million people come here every year to spend some holidays. They come with a view, they come with an image, they come with something, and we tend to become what we see reflected in their eyes. So we become islanded. We become islanded in their sense. So endemic, authentic, old style, whatever. But on the other side of that coin is that here, at least, I think also in Prince Edward Island and not least in Newfoundland, islanders are among the most mobile in the world. Has always been. Since it's a fact of life. You have to go somewhere to get somewhere. You have to leave, and also here, so enormous influences. So on the one hand, this is a mix of everything, and on the other hand, very authentic, very old, and very rural and down to earth things. Yeah. So yes, we have it both, and we play around a lot with that. When we in music, we love this the music of the island, but we have Eric now. He tours all over, and I had toured much more earlier. So we tend to pick up from everywhere, and then it becomes, as I think Kate said, it becomes our music, and this is the tradition. That is traditional. That stands.
Yeah. I know you play in a variety of other European countries. Do you sometimes hear a kind of a phrase or a style of playing, and then you bring it home to Gotland and you try it out on something, and people sort of listen and say, where did that come from?
Yes, always. Always. So in this last piece, a friend of ours, she wrote this piece, and the last tune is the Polska dance tune, the Polska tune. It includes a very common, very well-known theme from a children's show from television, of course. So it's always like addressing and playing, maybe poking fun, maybe something, but also it's part of citation. It's almost like in the academic world, you need a citation, and you need to communicate. You need to stretch out to others and say hello. So we do that a lot in music.
Yeah. I've seen a lot of nods from Kate and Catherine. So I wonder if you would want to reflect on this, what Ovi is talking about as well, and join the conversation before we go to our next round of songs. Kate or Catherine?
I feel like Kate wants to go first.
I don't know what it is about my face. I'm a big nodder, but people are always like, you look like you have something you want to say. I get that all the time. No, I'm just nodding because it's so much of what you're saying is sort of resonating for me around movement and migration and the sort of paradoxical tensions between isolation and movement that come up, not just in our lives in a literal way. Like I've traveled and lived all over the place in Europe, in the Middle East, and on the mainland, or as Canada, as my grandmother would say, and Newfoundland. And movement has been a huge part of my life. And it's just kind of beautiful to hear you say like that also can be, or is potentially the one of the defining qualities of islandness, when I've always felt like it's been a bit of a shortcoming sometimes for myself. So it's kind of cool to hear you kind of put it that way. And I think, tensions and paradoxes and sort of the queerness, I would say, of islandness. That's one of the many other binaries that don't fit neatly in our universes as islanders. And I think there's many of those. And I mentioned the idea of sort of the gifts and the horrors. I think those are some other very sort of queer paradoxes of island living. But no, I'm just nodding because it's beautiful to hear somebody who has so much experience in their relationship with music, but also in just thinking about place, just put words to experiences. It's always so nice to hear people put words to things that you've not been able to do for yourself before. So I was just sort of appreciating. Yeah. And I love that song. It was so fun. I wanted to dance.
Feel free next time.
Yeah.
I thought it was interesting, Ove, that you said that people on islands have to move a lot, and it's interesting because that is definitely true. We'd have to go and get our supplies elsewhere, and in times when islands were much more isolated. But there's also so many people on Prince Edward Island who haven't even left their counties, I think, let alone the province. Like there are people who've never traveled past, the edges of Prince County, or it's an interesting lens that I think people look through when they are from a small place. And the pandemic has made it for me that like I would really love to just stay here a little longer. I'm really enjoying, I think there's been a missing feeling for me since 1997 when they opened the bridge, which was the rotation of like people coming on and off the island at a certain time because of the ferries, and now people can just go whenever they want. And that for me, there was a rhythm to life on the island that has disappeared, and all of us being kind of stuck here, as I felt like a new rhythm has emerged where people are traveling around their little province and supporting local businesses and supporting local music, and having staycations in rural PEI where they haven't been before, and so it's an interesting time to be on an island and feeling really stuck here at times, but also like that is a huge gift that we've all been given.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. You mentioned, Dovie, as well about how people on islands, apart from those who don't travel very much, sometimes they are very well traveled. And I remember talking to a gentleman in Lark Harbor, which is a lovely community. Shout out to Lark Harbor. And I said, so what's it, we were just chatting, and I said, how do you feel when people say, how can you live here at the end of the road? And he said, well, Ivan, I just tell them, I don't live at the end of the road. I live at the beginning of the road. And it's out there, and he pointed to the ocean, and the whole ocean. I can go anywhere, and I'm not stuck like if I were in central Ontario where I could just go by road. So is that part of what you mean, Ove? Is that people travel a lot, especially on islands, because they're surrounded by the possibilities?
Yes. An acquaintance I have, he wrote that on remoteness, that people say that you live in the end of the road, a very remote thing. But if you stay there, if you live there, this is the road that leads to the world. But if you're in a city, the road or the street will only lead to the next street, and so the next, and to the next again. So if you're on an island, you're on the road to the world directly. It's a link of communication and not a hinder for it. And also another part about this being marginal or peripheral or whatever. I think it's interesting to think about what is provincial in the center, in the big centers. You can become provincial because there you're allowed to be born there, live there, and die there. You will never have to travel anywhere. There are more provinciality in the centers than in islands, because in islands you will always have a double side, because you will know where you are, and you will always have to know something about the centers. But the opposite is not true. In the centers, people can live and die without knowing anything about the peripheries. But in the peripheries, we will have to stick with that we are not actually in the center of politics and money and things like that. So it makes us travel, and also, it makes the life world bigger. Actually, I would say, not smaller.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I think we're going to go to another round of songs, and maybe we'll go in the same order. I guess it would make sense, because you've all been able to clear your throats a little bit in between. So maybe, Kate, if we can get you to come back and head into a second song, that would be wonderful.
Sure, yeah. My mind is just like running here now. But no, I was just sort of thinking about the beauty of that concept of your sort of inner life world becomes bigger because of the material conditions of your life. And I think that's so true. And my grandmother, who this next song is about, she was born and raised in Taylor's Bay, and her father was a planter, a fisherman, like all of her uncles. And he used to bootleg off of St. Pierre, MacLellan, which is across the water. And she was, sent into, she had never left that area. There was no road, there was water. And she was sent into town to work in her teens. And, I just think I've thought a lot about the massive difference between the beginning of her life and the end of her life. The world she was born into and the world she left behind, being just remarkably different places. And I've just thought about the courage there, and the types of travel that we do, that might not seem like a big distance traveled now from Taylor's Bay to town. I can drive it now in about 4.5, 5 hours. But at that time, that was a massive psychological, spiritual, cultural, and physical distance to travel. And I think the same about my grandfather on my paternal side, who's from Trinity, who was a war veteran, and all of the boys who left their small communities to go to war, traveling great distances physically, but also emotionally, and never really coming back in many, many ways. And he lived into his early 90s, but I'm sure he wasn't the same person. And I know he wasn't the same person when he came back. So just expanding my mind here a little bit about all the different ways that we travel and move. But yeah, this is a really simple song. And it's a song I wrote for my grandmother. But sort of, I guess, to borrow Ove's terms, like it's citationally just a very simple pop song. And something that's been really of interest to me as somebody who used to like writing poetry is open-ended lyrics that are really accessible. And so this song was sort of an exercise for me in thinking about how I communicate through pop sort of stuff. So, okay, here we go. Woo. I also about 2 years ago stopped playing guitar live. And my really dear friend, Megan MacLellan, her brother plays drums in Weary, and she plays guitar now. I stopped playing guitar. I didn't want to play guitar live anymore. So I also never play guitar anymore. So it was actually so comforting to see Catherine forget some words, because on this panel, I was like, Catherine MacLellan, and Catherine won an ECMA Songwriter of the Year like yesterday or the day before, and is this so like highly respected musician in Atlantic Canada. And that was like such an amazing moment for me. I think I was clapping while it happened, because I was just like, this is so great for me. It really was awesome. So okay, here we go. Somewhere between this body and my mind lies more than me. Lost time, memories, all that came before me. I hope that you'll haunt me on this ghost of an island. I hope you'll still want me when this little life's behind us. I'm more than blood and bone. I'm more than one, all alone. Lost time, memories, all that came before me. I hope that you'll haunt me on this ghost of an island. I hope you'll still want me when this little life's behind us. I hope that you'll haunt me on this ghost of an island. I hope you'll still want me when this little life's behind us. I feel like when I get too into singing, I forget to play guitar too.
That's wonderful.
Which isn't a bad thing necessarily.
One of the things that people have said about St. John's is that as a city, as a community, people have thirsty ears. Like they'll listen to anything at least once. Like they're really open to, and they understand the value of arts, broadly spoken. I'm wondering how, you know, you've had the Stormageddon, you've had the pandemic. That's been a hard time for artists of all kinds and so on. But do you see, as we sort of move towards something that might be different in the future, do you see the arts as having even more value and salience because of what people have been through in St. John's?
You know, I think art is inherently always the same amount of valuable because I think we are all experiencing different levels of crises all the time in the relativity of pain that is humanity. But as an arts organizer, I definitely see various changes, like just from my own perspective, you know, like I, for example, am a board member and an organizer for Girls Rock Camp, NL, which is an international like conglomerate of camps. I actually believe there's a Girls Rock in Sweden. And you know, we've had lots of changes to making programming virtual, and a big passion, you know, our program director, and she's also my best friend, Joanna Barker, who's also an amazing musician. She lives and teaches music in Natwashish in Southern Labrador. And, we do a lot of our programming virtually, and it's actually, and I've seen a lot of disability activists say the same thing too, of like, this was always accessible. And we're seeing it once it's sort of available on a large scale for people. But it's like, there's many ways that we can make music kind of accessible that's not city centered. And I think St. John's gets, St. John's has so many wonderful communities, and I've been really privileged to be part of so many of them. I've been on the programming committee for the Folk Festival and Girls Rock Camp. And, I've been doing music programming with incarcerated folks for years. And, like something that's really important to me. And I think just the reason why a lot of St. John's has sort of hungry ears is because funding goes to cities. So that's a reason why it's sort of, there's high visibility in cities, because we have venues and we have larger numbers of population and we have funding, because it's sort of commercializable and it becomes an industry and it becomes sort of a bit capitalized. But when you start getting into community arts organizing, you kind of shift around with the value or your relationship with music. And it's such a joy, like as somebody who's also done industry stuff, to not be in the industry spaces. I'm sure Catherine could probably speak much more to that than me about her relationship with, how industry affects our deeper, more spiritual relationship with music. But yeah, I don't know. I'm really passionate about the way that this pandemic has allowed us to access diverse peoples across Newfoundland and Labrador in ways that aren't city centered and that aren't industry centered and that aren't about the commercialization of music in a city centered way. And I think that's afforded some really beautiful possibilities for creating together. And for me with youth on Zoom, that's really fun. But yeah, that's some of what I've been seeing. And again, something that's been beautiful for me is the accessibility that this pandemic has afforded music. And for me, I'm most passionate about supporting and encouraging marginalized voices in this province. So having increased accessibility enables me to continue doing that. And that's what I've been seeing in lots of ways.
Great, thanks. I think it's very good comments there about sort of a democratizing availability of certain kinds of music. I've been to more festivals this year than I've ever been able to, because it's all been virtual and not quite the same experience, but it's
right.
Wonderful to be able to taste that. Yeah,
I'd love to see a combo in the future.
Yes. Yeah. I think that might come.
Yeah, me too.
Next, Catherine, please, if you can join us and have another song from you, that would be wonderful. Oh, by the way, I have from back in the day a Sync the Link T-shirt. Do you remember that? There was a movement. Yeah. I wish I should have dug it up for this day.
I love that. Yeah. Anytime the idea of having a bridge or a causeway or a tunnel or anything came up in PEI, it was very polarizing, and people were either all against it or all for it. And anyway, I'm glad we have it, because it's been great for me, but somebody might blow it up someday. I don't know. It's possible. I thought that I would do a song of my dad's as this second song. I talked about growing up not in a traditional music household, but with lots of music around. That's because my dad was a songwriter, and I feel very lucky to have grown up with that kind of sensibility. And his approach to art and to music was all about taking space for it, and he was very diligent with editing, and he made me believe that I could be a musician as a professional job because he did it. So that's how I got fooled into this business. This is his song. And there's so many different theories on how this song came to be, and because my dad is gone, I don't get to ask him these questions, but I do, every time I sing this song, if I'm not on the island, I imagine being back in the peaceful rivers and fields, and it just reminds me of Prince Edward Island. beneath its snowy mantle, cold and clean, the unborn grass lies waiting for its coat to turn to green. The snowbird sings the song he always sings, and it speaks to me of flowers that will bloom again in spring. When I was young, my heart was young then too. Anything that it would tell me, that's the thing that I would do. Now I feel such emptiness within, for the thing that I want most in life's the thing that I can't win. Spread your tiny wings and fly away, and take the snow back with you where it came from on that day. The one I love forever is untrue, and if I could, you know that I would fly away with you. The breeze along the river seems to say that you'll only break my heart again should I decide to stay. So little snowbird, take me with you when you go to that land of gentle breezes where the peaceful waters flow. And spread your tiny wings and fly away, and take the snow back with you where it came from on that day. The one I love forever is untrue, and if I could, you know that I would fly away with you. Oh, if I could, you know I would fly away with you.
That's wonderful. That's sublime. It's very good. Somebody put on the chat just now that this was your version of this song is her favorite version of the song, and so glad to see it. So, Anne Murray will just have to come in second, I guess. Right?
Hope she's not watching. Jeez.
Yeah, well, you never know. I'm sure she would agree as well. It's interesting that Kate had mentioned her grandmother and how important that is on some of her work, and her grandfather, and you've talked about this. And you worked on a production about your father's life and music and so on. Are there things you learned about him and about his relationship to music that kind of stick with you during that process?
Yeah, I mean, I learned so much. I was 14 when my dad passed away, and like my daughter's 15 now, so she's maybe different than most kids, but she's not asking me questions about how I grew up or what my life story is. She knows a lot of it, but I was surprised at how little I knew, and I couldn't ask him, and there were so few people that actually knew my dad through all the stages of his life, really just his sister. And I actually interviewed her, and much of the interview was like, oh, I didn't really pay attention to what he was doing. I don't know. It's like, oh God, thank you. But it was awesome. She's a very amazing lady. But yeah, so we just started putting feelers out to everybody in the community that knew him. People in Toronto, where he played rock and roll in the 50s, and all the island connections here, and all the Sing-Along Jubilee, all the CBC connections. And I learned a lot. Thanks in a big part to my friend Bob Mercereau, who helped me with that research. And I got to know him, but I also started, I don't know, he kind of disappeared from me a little bit in knowing all the facts. I started losing the feeling of him, and actually when I ultimately started doing that show night after night and singing those songs, I felt him really come back to me just through the music. And so for me, music is just like such an integral part of my life, and we're all connected through it. And so this has been really fun today to be connected by islands and by music. And yeah, I just feel very grateful that you've brought me here today.
Oh, we're lucky that you're here. Are you then telling your daughter now about why you wrote certain songs, just in case, like you're curious about your father's process in writing songs?
No, she's not.
Okay.
Yeah, she's too busy being a 15-year-old.
Yeah, I know. It's a full-time job being 15 and more.
Yes.
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
Yes, indeed. Yeah. It's wonderful though. It's yeah.
We'll head over to Sweden again, to Gotland, to the island, and see if Ove and Eric.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll just ask Eric, just to start. When you were growing up, was it cool to have a father who did folk fiddling?
Well, actually, I mean, like folk music was all I knew. So
Okay.
to speak. But on the other hand, it was folk music from many different parts of the world.
Yeah.
But I mean, still today, I'm sort of discovering the popular culture that everyone else always have known in my age. So
Me too.
Oh, yeah. Oh, there wasn't much happening out there. Don't worry. Great. Thanks.
So
yeah, so this is actually what we're gonna play now is very much like the music of my childhood, which is folk music, but not from Sweden, but from the east of Europe.
Yeah, just to introduce this, you could pick up on a theme that what is traditional music? It's maybe music, that when the fiddle or the musician has to go to travel somewhere and to actually knock on the door to get on somebody, because at least in those days when I learned to play, it was not formalized. There were no schools to go to. You had to actually go somewhere and knock on somebody's door and say, I love your music. Can you teach me? So that's what I did. I went to Romania. I went to Bulgaria, and I got a record in the 70s, early 70s from Romania. I said, Jesus Christ, I need to go there. So I went there and many times, and also learned to play some. We played 3 Romanian tunes now in a set. First a song for listening, a table song, and then 2 dances, a slow dance and the quick dance. And it's wonderful music. And people here in Gotland have started to dance to these tunes also. There are certain people that love to do that. So it's Gotlandic Romanian style here.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful. What kind of tunes are they? What are the names for those tune types? You know, like Polska or whatever.
The first one is it's actually a sort of a tale or something, a story, but in no words. The story is about a shepherd that had lost his herd, lost the sheep, and it's very sad. And then he finds it, and it's a little bit happy again. And then he loses it. It just goes on. It's a very widespread in Eastern Europe. This is a widespread theme. So the music may be different, but the theme is often that happens. That music is sort of descriptive, in a sense that also table music. We do have a little of that here. In Gotland, especially in Gotland, there were many tunes, especially in minor, that were not supposed to be danced to. They were supposed to be, to drink to them, to listen to them, and to inhale and just reflect. And then the other ones in major, often, they were for dancing. So also in Romania, this is the style. The second one is a hora. It's a circle dance. And the third one was a sirba, a quick dance. When I heard this, first time I heard this, I got shock, sort of a culture shock. And then going to Romania, I realized that there were more similarities to hear than differences. The differences is what you hear, but how musicians attack the instruments and how they think about the instruments in their music, it's much more similar than you would think. So in many ways, we are dealing with a broad European, actually a music tradition, but it sounds different, but it's very different from commercial and popular music in the way of approaching how to make the music and approaching how to play together and things like that.
I think that's very present, like going to folk music festivals all over. It's usually very easy to communicate with other musicians, even though you don't actually share the music itself. You can still sort of jam together because you have the same kind of approach to the music. Whereas you go to a jazz jam, like the context is so different, and you have this, you take solos or whatever. I mean, in a rock band, you always have a drummer, and already at that point, it sort of limits what I can do. But meeting other folk musicians is always some kind of connection in that sense.
And what you also referred to about a certain openness in traditional musicians, and also in islands, it's a certain openness, a certain inclusiveness that is very. I find it everywhere. When I knock at somebody's door and want to, hello, can you please? I love your music. Can you teach me? They would say, yes, come in. Of course, even if they are big shots, big stars. And I think that's something you learn with the music.
You mean if I get to Gotland on the ferry there, I can come into your place and ask for a lesson?
Sure.
Totally.
Absolutely. People do.
The hesitation was very good.
Yeah. And that goes for you all. If you come over.
I'm glad you explained the table music, because I think somewhere you were saying you were going to do a table music tune. So it's something to sit and listen to and contemplate as opposed to dance to. Yeah.
In the style what Catherine is doing, I think maybe in the when sort of Celtic Irish, there are lots of songs that are supposed to be, you're supposed to sit and listen and get intoxicated by the music. But here there's no words, so the musicians do it instead with their instruments, and it's sort of like a lot of heart.
You mentioned the folk festival phenomenon and people being from different backgrounds being able to understand each other. And that's one of the things that really attracts me to folk festivals, where you have a stage where you have 3 or 4 different groups. And you can kind of tell the difference between people who, well, I don't know, I don't want to be judgmental, but there are people who really rise to that occasion, enjoy it, and then just sort of start tapping and then pick up an instrument and play along. And there are others who do their thing. And that's it. Yeah, but I think, and maybe part of it has to do with, that sense of tradition and maybe of islandness, of openness to, okay, I want to figure out what they're doing here, and this is kind of cool.
Yeah, we have in Sweden. We have since way long back something which in Swedish it would be translated into fiddlers' gatherings. There are no stages, there are no set performances, no contracts. You go there, you jam, and people go, and then you jam with some person, and then you go to find somebody else in a big place. So there's nothing set, but this idea to be to learn and to choose and to give and to take is so much invested in the music around here. So and this all comes to the folk festivals also. So there's much more going on behind or down below the stages than on them.
Yeah, which I can't get access to. Catherine or Kate,
thousands of people coming only to get into the gig, the jamming.
Yeah. Catherine or Kate, do you have something you want to comment on related to our conversation here about folk festivals and various other things?
I would just say, it's so funny because I've always been a non-joiner, Ivan. It has nothing to do with like, I do my thing, and it's purely fear-based. I'm just so afraid of playing the wrong thing. But I've been really missing the vibe of folk festivals and people just making music together en masse. And just last week I got to go to a very small music camp that had a really interesting, diverse group of people attending it, and I got to jam. I got to be a joiner, Ivan, and it was so fun. We had a beautiful woman named Tiffany Liu playing the Chinese pipa, which is a 4-stringed instrument, and then Sarah Hagen, who is an incredible classical pianist, and then a couple folkies, me and Irish Mythen, just jamming. And I think Kinley Dowling stopped in at one point, and we went like into outer space with our jams because we were coming from such different places. And it really was a powerful experience to finally be a joiner. I'm like hooked.
We're at sort of our hour and a half, but I keep getting these messages that people saying that they're enjoying it, and I know that you're only booked for this period or hour and a quarter, whatever it was. But a couple of things. One is that if somebody has another song they'd like to do sort of to close out, we'd be very happy for that. You think about that.
Do you want to play a song, Ivan, to close us out?
No.
Oh, it'd be so nice if you did, though.
Yeah, you should.
No, that's
Yeah,
okay.
you've got all those instruments back there.
Yeah, that's right. Those belong to my sister. No.
Oh, come on.
No, I think it would be great. The other thing would be if there are some folks, participants who have a question, if they want to put it up into the chat, we could maybe do that. But before that, even, do you have something you want to ask one of the other musicians? You've been talking and you've been listening to them. Is there something that has been triggered in your mind about something you're curious about? And as you think about that, I don't know, does this Islands conference, do they have a CD that comes out every year? Like, I don't see why can't they have a 2 CDs maybe? And they could get some island artists from different parts of the world and get the rights and pay them and all that kind of stuff. And every person who comes to the conference would get a 2 CD collection of island music. I mean, wouldn't that be amazing? Maybe they already do that. Apparently they don't. They're passing that information on. Or maybe it'll be a USB or something like that these days. Does anyone have a comment or question? Yes, sorry.
I have looked around actually for these kind of things and doing island studies on music and things like that. Is there a market for like island musics? There is. So I found one that says island musics from all over the world. It says a box of 3 CDs, I think, from very different. Actually, it doesn't work very well because it's really too different, and you don't get it. You jump from musically from one and the other, and so on. But so it has to be done professionally, also with the sort of notion of things. Otherwise, you just collect everything like in a box, or I don't know. But it could be done. But there seems nobody actually have taken on that, or very few. So maybe you can do that. It's open.
Well, I think one of the things that conversation threads about, you mentioned how people come to Gotland and they expect to see something. Like there's a kind of an image that they have, an experience that they're expecting from the brochure that they picked up on the ferry. And so then you kind of have to respond to that somehow if you're hired to play in a hotel or something like that. But how does your identity as a person who actually lives on the island year round, how do you negotiate that with the expectation? I mean, that could be a theme for a bunch of songs.
Yeah, maybe. One of the ways what I do, I speak Gotlandic. It's a sort of a heavy, you could call it a heavy dialect. There's also an older language, which I do understand. I don't speak too much, but I could. So when I play the traditional songs, I tend to stick to Gotlandic. But when I get in the academic mode, I tend to speak what we call mainlandish, which is sort of Swedish. So of course we adjust and we keep different personas. The music persona, my music persona is more islanded than my academic. Why? Because if I play music, I can come from Gotland and they can still hire me. They will still hire me. But if I'm an academic, if like I am a professor, if I speak Gotlandic, they will probably think, well, he's from somewhere out there. It's not worth it, or something. So I mean, it's a different hierarchy of positions. So being sort of marginalized is, as we offer, happens to us as academics, but not as musicians.
No, quite the other way around. I mean, I spent my first years in Stockholm before moving here, and so I don't have the dialect, and that's really like a disadvantage.
Yeah.
Because if I want to be authentic, I mean, and especially here, since we have so many tourists every year coming here, so people they're a little bit skeptical before they actually know, oh, are you a real Gotlander now? Are you actually living here, or are you just passing by like everyone else? But then I have a very typical last name, from here. So many people will at least know that, oh, okay, you're okay.
Yeah, Kate, do you put on a stronger Newfoundland accent when you're
well,
doing?
I relate a lot to what you're saying, and I don't know. I think, you know, just on a more serious tone, like that causes me a lot of pain. I think in a lot of ways is I see a lot of I don't know, like something for me is with my identity and my history and cultural identity. You know, it's painful to have to live with the trauma and the violence of the histories of this place and my family. And then there are, you know, people who can just come here and put on a fake accent and do a jig and a reel and like mummering and Jig's dinner and all that stuff. And just enjoy the quirky funness of island people or whatever, and have no responsibility or accountability to the extreme conditions that people still live in: poverty and addictions, and access to resources for Indigenous populations across this island. So, you know, like it's all well and good, like as musicians to, and because we get to be preservers and active in cultural dialogue, that's such a gift. And I have so much respect for Ove and Catherine and you, Ivan, and all the different ways that we preserve and also continue culture as a living thing, not as a historical object that we can take and pass around, but that is alive. And part of that livingness is care for the very people from which those traditions come from. So when we try and dissect the music from the people who made it and the hardships that created that music, we do a real violence, right? And we do a real kind of appropriation that perpetuates really damaging a different type of isolation, right? And I would say a violent type of isolation where we distill one version of a tourist-based, and you know, my dad says like tourism is of course important here. It's extremely important to the livelihood of people here. So I'm not discounting the value of tourism whatsoever. It's extremely important to people's livelihood, and I have the utmost respect for that. But what I'm sort of speaking to around the seriousness is that like these histories aren't just aesthetic, right? They're informed by specific historic contexts, political migrations, social issues, and ongoing forms of harm and resilience. And we can lean into both of those, but I think we need to lean into both of those. Like Catherine's song, The Tempest, like that's a heavy song, right? And Catherine is citing like historical tradition with sort of different Irish sounds and things like that, but then it is also bringing in some affect and emotion that we can relate to in the present moment. And I think about my grandfather who died when my nan was 12 as a fisherman on the water, right? And she was afraid of water. So there's also like these lived ways that this music is really, really important. And just as an artist, I think I get a little riled up around that, and thinking about that and hearing Ove sort of like speak so beautifully and humbly about that. I think about how my experience has been informed with like a little bit of anger at times, and like hurt there of having to inherit the pain of these stories while others just get to like like play along with stereotypes. So yeah, that's my little rant.
Well, that's a great rant. That was wonderful. Those are really important comments. And I think there are moments when we actually read the lyric sheet of traditional songs and we say, oh, wait a minute, you know, that's not what I thought it was. Yeah. We have one question that came in from the attendees. To a large extent, the pandemic has islanded us all. Might your music reflect this experience as being the same or different as island living? I think there's a slight reference to that, but is living in pandemic like living on an island? And then being on an island and in a pandemic is, you know, doubly advantageous. Anyone?
That's a tough one. I don't think you get to become an islander just by going through a pandemic. Sorry.
No, but I suppose you could say that that in partly, at least here around, we are among the winners. If there is a winners on the pandemic, not on the pandemics, but on the side effects, because I have now spent a whole 1.5 academic year in my home in Eastern Gotland, which is the most peripheral in Sweden that you can find, and it works fine, and I can connect with you from here. So I mean, if to be islanded mean to stay where you are and still connect, yes. And much of islandness is that much about islandness is something like a, you know, like bungee jump even. If you go, you are somewhere and then you are thrown out in the world, but there's something, a big rubber band that whoops will draw you back again, and you will go and come and go and go. And so the islands are sort of setting there. And now we have been, the whole world has been available in a new sense. We don't have to go there physically, but the world is much more present here now. So we are in part the winners. We haven't lost much, but we have won a lot.
Yeah, I would echo that so much. That's been my experience. Like I've been, like I had to sort of, as an academic as well, like had to make choices around, like I really wanted to be here, and I thought about doing work about here. I needed to be here, and that came with a lot of compromises as a PhD student, namely giving up teaching jobs and stuff like that. And during the pandemic, I've been able to teach all year and be connected to students at the University of Toronto and at Memorial University, and all sorts of various forms of connectivity. I've been able to absolutely similarly be in my place. Like I'm on the ocean right now in Holyrood, you know, so I've had the same kinds of connectivity that I wasn't able to have before.
Okay, so I think we've relied upon you quite a bit. I don't know if anybody had a song in mind. I was thinking, oh, I wonder what's a traditional ending, like where I grew up, we'd do a waltz at the end and people would waltz around. I don't know if in Gotland, if there's a traditional kind of a tune type that you do at the very end of a webinar meeting like this, or whatever it is. Feel free to do it, but anyway, otherwise we can just go, and we'll say thanks to everybody for doing this. You've been so gracious, all of you, for providing your knowledge, your wisdom, your talent, your insight into where you live and how that connects to other places and other islands. And it's been a privilege. I don't know where the time went exactly. Anyway, but that's probably a good thing, and I'm by the comments, I think people have been enjoying it as well. So thanks so much, Catherine, to Kate, to Ovi, Eric, and for being part of this. We have no kind of ritual in academics to actually end something, so we'll just say goodbye and see you next time, and all the best in the future for you.
Thank you,
thank you, Ivan.
Thank you.
You'll have to play a song next time, Ivan.
Yeah, okay, next time I'll do it.
Next time.
Thank you.
Nice
Thank you.
Thank
Care,
you,
everybody. Yeah.
All right.
Thanks to the panel.